what's the personality of what we put forward, right? Are we a home to places? Are we confident? Are we arrogant? Are we spirited? Are we optimistic? Are we strategic? Are we significant? What do we want the personality? How do we want people to feel and think about us when they see our content? And then drive consistent content, authentic content against that over time. There's no shortcut in that regard to me. And so I think that content over time is what creates the compound interest that gets to the perceptions we want to be seen as for anybody in that regard, but especially in this way.
Hey y'all, and welcome to Sorority Chat. I'm Liz Toombs, a designer and sorority alum who's obsessed with all things Greek life. My mission? To bring you real conversations, smart insights, and fun stories that help make sorority living even better. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfy, and let's chat. Hey friends, welcome back. Today's episode is going to be so good. And I'm sorry if you catch my little freeloader office mate, Bartlett, barking in the background. We're having some thunderstorms today, so he's putting in his 2 cents. We are going to dive in today into something that is everywhere around us, whether we realize it or not, and that's storytelling. The stories that we tell about our chapters, our values, friendships, and even ourselves, they shape how others see us and sometimes how we see ourselves. To help us unpack the power of storytelling, especially in the college space, I am joined by a total expert when it comes to building meaningful, magnetic brands, Ethan Braden. Ethan is the Vice President and Chief Marketing Communications Officer at Texas A&M University, and before that, he held a similar role at Purdue, where he helped skyrocket the university's reputation through bold, emotion-driven storytelling. He was named 2023 Content Marketer of the Year, Business to Consumer, by the Content Marketing Institute, and even co-led Purdue's brand efforts when the school was recognized as one of the most innovative universities in the country. He also teaches personal branding to student athletes and has a serious passion for helping young people tell their stories in a way that are both real and strategic. So whether you're in a sorority leadership role, dreaming of a creative career, or just trying to figure out your own personal narrative, this convo is for you. Welcome, Ethan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm excited to jump into this conversation today. And you know what? I should have said howdy, shouldn't I?
Howdy.
There it is.
There it is.
I learned that from you at a conference, the howdy, the good old A&M howdy. You are known for building emotionally resonant brands. And so when it comes to storytelling, what do you think makes a story truly stick, especially for a college age audience like sorority women?
Yeah, I think we're probably going to get sick of the word authenticity today.
Okay.
Just like we would maybe AI. But I think it comes back to that idea. There's a difference between facts and information and true stories that stick, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the best stories actually, they regulate and activate the brain. Mm-hmm. They produce oxytocin, right? There's an actual neuroscience component to this, and it is really about how are we human, right? How do we get to the emotion? How do we emotionally resonate with individuals with something that matters to them? And so it's chock full of empathy, of curiosity, of specificity. And there's components of it, of feelings and outcomes, et cetera, that we can discuss. But I think at the end of the day, it's, do I really get to the human emotional element of what we're sharing? And can we connect on that?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I appreciate that. And one of my favorite parts about doing this podcast is hearing, I always call it everyone's origin story. Like, I always want to know, like, where you came from, how you got to where you are, like what makes you tick, that kind of thing. And so what you've described is exactly that feeling that I get, and what I'm wanting that human connection to get to know you on a deeper level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that comes to mind is, sorority recruitment, and you're talking to these women during recruitment and you're trying to find a connection as you're trying to find your home. And so how can chapters or individuals going through recruitment use storytelling to shape how either the organization is perceived or how you as a potential new member are perceived as you're going through that recruitment process?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So there's a great quote we use oftentimes that say brands are most effectively delivered externally when they're best understood internally. And so I think that deep introspection first of the organization or the company or the product or the person, for that matter, of the three questions really are, who are you, right? What do you stand for? And if I'm empathetic and curious and I put myself in the shoes of someone else, why should they care? And so I think asking that first of our organization, who are we, right? What does make us tick? What do we stand for? What is our history? What are our values? What are our characteristics? What do we believe? Great brands, many of them attract as well as repel. And so it's okay to take a stance on things one way or another. And then why should people care, right? What are you going to do for them? As I think about whether it's incoming students to Texas A&M University or an employee at a company or a sorority new member, for instance, what does that look like? What is my experience going to be shaped by? Who's going to shape it for me? And what are those outcomes that this experience can deliver, in particular to all the other ways I can spend my time and money, right? So less about, Apple does a wonderful job. We bring it up a lot, right? About instead of the gigahertz and the megahertz, et cetera, the idea of 1,000 songs in your pocket. What is my future and what is my experience and what do those connections mean when I say yes to you? And how do you get me to vote in that regard is very personal. It's very emotional. It's very hopefully curious and empathetic. But can you give me that experience and can you give it to me in a rich emotional fashion to where we can connect and I can determine whether there's fit here or not?
When you said that great brands attract and they repel, it just came to mind for me about being a business owner. I hate, the thought that I could repel someone,
Sure.
It's like, oh, you don't want to embrace that. And you don't want that personally either, especially going through the recruitment process. You don't want to feel like somebody doesn't like you, but it's just part of the process and part of the authentic side of things that you were talking about. It's just hard for us in human nature, I think, to wrap our heads around. We don't want that.
Well, that's the case though, right? Like not everyone, not every product, not every university, not every company, not every city is for everyone. Seth Godin talks to us about all the time. He's like, who are you for? And that's okay. The student that comes to Texas A&M University is not the same student that goes to Reed College. And that's okay. We should be really clear about that. And you may love Walmart, you may hate it. You may love Southwest Airlines, you may hate it. For those that hate it, I think Southwest would say potentially, well, then we're not for you. But there's something that makes us us, that makes us authentic, that gives us a value proposition. That's part of our history, that's part of our values, that's part of our essence, that's part of our culture that may not be for you. And that's okay. Because generally speaking, there's enough folks for most good ideas. And so it's okay to repel, especially when we're not sitting here in the middle, but actually we're attracting something that may have, for lifetime value, a really good experience. That it can be a really good fit. We don't want to get that wrong.
No, you're exactly right. So on that note of authenticity, how can sorority women learn or do better about owning and telling their own real stories, especially in a world that's very Instagrammable? We have this pressure to put forth a perfect image. Like, what are some pieces of advice that you would share?
Yeah, I think, it starts with audiences, right? So who's the audience? What are they looking for? And how deeply how deeply do we understand them? What are their frustrations? What are their tensions? What are their aspirations? What makes them tick? Where are they coming from? Where are they in their journey? If we deeply understand that, I think first, then you can talk about what are we trying to achieve here? What are our objectives? What are the attitudes, the beliefs, the behaviors that we're trying to create in this interaction with them, that we're trying to reinforce with them in this interaction, and maybe in some cases that we're trying to change or stop for that matter, right? From there, I think it's about getting to that idea of two things: one, story and emotion. And that's not necessarily profound, but it's difficult in practice. It's different between providing you the facts and the lists and the sheets and the information versus, can I tell you a story that you might actually remember about how we affect a young woman's life, how we affect their future, how we affect their belonging, their fit, their well-being while they're here, and does that matter? And so I think it's continuing to really understand the audience, what we're trying to achieve with them, what they're needing and looking for, and how are we a solution to that? And then can I bring that to life really through a story rather than tell, this, can I show you? And you can do it on Instagram and you can do it on TikTok. They're amazing in that regard. Those snippets, those atoms all accumulate into a perception for that individual of this place. What is this place? Do I like it? Do I feel safe here? Do I feel confident about this? Do I feel energetic about it? Do I want to put my name on it, right? All of those, even snippets, those atoms can contribute to an overall story that the person tells about your organization.
What I hear you say too is a lot of this work is internal on the front end. The what am I about? What are my values? Those kinds of things. You have to figure that out first before then you can start to know what to share or craft any sort of image, right?
100%. That goes back to the idea. The best brands delivered externally are those that know themselves internally well, right? That introspection is tough. That strategy, that work is hard. It's the stuff that we should be doing, right? We talk about in branding and marketing all the time, right? Branding and brand building and brands are not logos. They're not taglines. They're not colors. They're the stories that we tell. They're the experiences we create. They're the perceptions that we manage or influence. That's hard work. That's the good marketer, but it also has the payoff, right? I can flog you with a tagline all day long. You may or may not believe me.
Yeah.
But if I tell you great stories about who we are, what this organization is, or the experiences we create, that's the introspection. That's the substance that we want to share. And that's the authenticity. That's the getting to know us, being known, and wanting to know the other.
And I think like your high school years, the college years, all of this is very formative. You're trying to figure those things out, especially even going into like your early professional years, young professional years. And so I think it's ever evolving. And I think people should be aware of that. You know, you may be one thing now, or this may be, you know, how you feel now. And then that could change with more life experience, and that's okay. And brands evolve as well.
Yeah, no, I completely. I think in market research, we'll often ask the question of like, what do we know and how do we know it to be true? And I think about my own fraternity experience and having worked for the fraternity, and now 25 years later or whatever it is, right? You hear these claims, right? We're the greatest in friendship, or we're the greatest in belonging, or we're not just one type of individual. We've got a diversity of individuals. It's like, okay, but how do you know, right? How do we actually support that? And does the audience that we're trying to attract care? Can they believe it? These kind of sweeping claims are one thing. The introspection of what are we really about, and do we live that experience to where I know there's the saying, right? Live the gospel and when necessary, use words, right? What are we conveying without the words, and do we deeply know together the experience we create?
Yeah, no, that's very good. I'm curious your thoughts on how visuals, beautiful visuals, play in with messaging from a brand standpoint, from a sorority or fraternity organization standpoint. Obviously, I'm in design, so aesthetics appeal to me. A lot of our listeners love design and aesthetics. So what do you think the role of visuals are in this?
I think it's huge, but I'll delineate or separate that a little bit. There's the question of what's the role of visuals. There's also the role of beautiful visuals, and those may be different, okay? I think visually, we're visually oriented. We are visually stimulated. I want to video storytell in all of our efforts here, for instance, at Texas A&M and previously at Purdue. So I think the visuals are key, and there's a lot of best practices of those. Google's got plenty of research that suggests that the creative is one of the biggest drivers of brand perception and of sales in that regard. I'm not convinced in every application necessarily that do they have to be beautiful? Do they have to be polished? Do they have to be Madison Avenue? Because that is where you start to chip at some of the authenticity. And so I think that's something we're always asking is, you know, is a user-generated graphic or a user-generated video on, in particular, social media as effective as something that we can produce for thousands of dollars? Oftentimes, yes, right? It's conveying an authentic experience. It's conveying a real experience. So frankly, some of that comes down to testing. Can we show that to our audiences? And what do they take away? Do they take away we spent a bunch of money to look fake, to look manufactured, to look synthetic, to look Hollywood? Or do they love it? And we're going to have to see how that jives. But oftentimes, I think, you know, the work can be done in the visual that's authentic, that's accurate, that's good, right? We don't want to violate some of the best practices in that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be beautiful. And I think that's what scares away a lot of folks, in particular with video, is they say, I don't have the team, I don't have the talent, I don't have the dollars, I don't have the time. For what you're trying to achieve, I think you need to evaluate that level of beauty and can we go out with good versus not going out, you know, pursuing perfect. And so I think that's a good question for people to ask.
That's a really good point, and it's very timely. I just saw an article, it was either yesterday or the day before, and it was in relation to interior design businesses and saying that, you know, your image that you're crafting online is potentially killing your business.
Correct.
Because you are trying to put forth this perfect, polished, instead of a more relatable component as well, or a blend of the two. And so that's completely in line with everything that you were just describing. So I think it's valuable insight for people to consider.
Yeah, I don't want it to scare people away. We spoke on a conference a couple of weeks ago, and there was this element of like, we just don't have this capability. We don't have the equipment. We don't have the dollars. We don't have. you have an iPhone and you can do a lot of things with an iPhone with great people with great stories. And then you can test it, show it to some of your members, show it to some of your alumni, whatever it may be. Let's get the reactions of folks. And is it turning them off, or is it actually advancing the perceptions that we want? But you can overdo it in that space. And that oftentimes kills creativity and it kills action. And that's not what we want.
You're exactly right. It definitely kills action because you're just kind of paralyzed by fear or just thinking you're not good enough.
Right.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So you have built some world-class marketing teams, and I'm curious from a hiring standpoint, what kinds of storytellers stand out to you when you're going through the hiring process? And what skills should our listeners be developing if they want to pursue a career in creative or in branding and in that space?
That's a great question. And those are different, right? Whether I hire somebody in the creative space or the design space or the storytelling space or the marketing space, I may have different requirements in that regard of what I'm looking for. A few things come to mind. I'll tell you the greatest interview I ever had with a really talented storyteller who's now at the place where I used to work. I remember asking, I said, what do you like to do when it comes to storytelling? And she said, I love making people cry. And I said, really? I'm all about that. This is great. Good for you. Tell me more, right? But what she had hit on was this idea of, I want to evoke emotion. I want to enchant. And that's a funny word for some, but really it's this idea of, can I create this incredible ecstatic admiration and demand for what you are through storytelling? And so this idea that she was tapping into emotion, she was turning it on versus turning it down, to me spoke to the idea that we were going to be able to go out and create feelings, create goosebumps, create tears, create elation with humans. That to me is number one. This idea that I want to create emotional response to my work. Number two is people are curious, right? Like, I want the folks that say, I'm going to engulf and embrace this opportunity, and I'm going to get out and know and be known. I'm going to look for the stories. I'm curious about these people. I'm curious about what makes them tick. I'm curious about what makes us great. That sort of initiative, that sort of motor, that sort of proactivity, that sort of confidence is really attractive when hiring, because that's tough to teach, and I'd much rather pull you back than I'd have to start you up. I think that piece is really good. And that speaks also to this idea of, it's not necessarily about me, it's about the audience. So when we can get into that beginner's mind, when we can get into the other person's shoes versus necessarily just casting our perceptions, our belief of how the world works and what it looks like, to me, that then gets very real. And so I like that kind of combination of, I want to evoke emotion, I want to go out and be very curious, and I really want to know that other person or that entity and how it operates necessarily versus casting what I think.
I love the piece of curiosity. I think that can favor you in so many ways. And so I really appreciate that comment. I now have a puppy on my lap. I don't know if you saw it, but yes.
I wish I did.
Yes, Storm's going full force outside, and so he's decided to join me up here.
Smart dog.
Let's talk about personal branding for a second. So from the standpoint of, if a woman's going through sorority recruitment, or if a student's applying for internships, or maybe they're starting a business, any kind of avenues like that, how can someone craft a personal story that would set them apart in an authentic way?
Yeah. I think one, it's again, understanding my audience. What are they looking for, right? What are they looking to achieve? What are their, frankly, frustrations, aspirations, tensions, and what value can I add to that? There's a realness to it. So it always goes back to the same place of, who are you? What do you stand for? But then from that point, I think on is then what do I bring, right? What are the skill sets? What are the initiatives? What are the values? What are the traits? What are the dreams I have that I bring to the table in that regard? And do I have some stories or some stars or my own annual report that I can tell you through story of impact I've had, the influence I've had, the difference I have made, the way I work with individuals? I want to cast the idea of, you want to work with me, or you want to have me in your culture, and what that means for your organization in a really real, personal, emotional fashion. It's not bloviating. It's not, bragging or being too prideful. But I do think this element of, do I know myself? Do I know you? What that fit can look like, and what can that outcome of us together look like, is a really powerful story. And then I need to bring that through.
So that works if you feel like you know your story, or you have a valuable story. What about somebody who's like, I don't really have anything interesting to share? Because that's not true. But how do you get them to dig deeper and start to look at that more closely and come up with some stories that they could talk about?
Yeah, everyone has a story. That's everyone. Our president is marvelous at that here at Texas A&M University, where he says every Aggie has a story. And they all matter, no matter how big, no matter how small. Actually, we saw some of that in the branding at Purdue in the past. There was a focus on this idea of the giant leap. And we heard from some audience say, actually, that turns me off because I'm not sure I'm capable of or I've ever experienced or produced a giant leap in life. I might be more in the small steps phase of my life. Coming to Purdue might be my giant leap. Am I valued here? Is there a place for me? And so we really had to look at that idea of the evolution of the person and their story and what they've achieved. But I think, again, it's the hard work, right? It's having those conversations with their friends, their mentors, their chapter sisters, brothers, et cetera, their parents. What are those stories that I do have? What are triumphs that you've experienced? What are setbacks you've experienced? What have you learned along the way? How have you changed? How have you evolved? What defines you? What were those experiences that create your values, that create the ambitions you have for your future? All of those are just introspection, but you got to go through it. And it's hard work. It's not rocket science, but I'd much rather have a real individual who talks to me about, for instance, a setback and how they came through it. That tells me so much more than maybe, the hits on their resume, for instance. And so I would encourage folks that, there is a prep that needs to go into these interviews. There's a prep, whether it's coming to the chapter or coming to a job or coming to Texas A&M for that matter. Do the hard work, but realize we all have a story no matter where we are in the journey. What's yours?
Do the hard work, right? Yeah. Everyone tries to avoid it, but we just have to go through it. We have to do it.
Absolutely.
And I like your advice to ask those around you. Talk to your parents, talk to your peers, ask them what they see from you and what stands out to them. And that gives you a totally different point of view than how you may see yourself or your stories. And you may discover you're inspiring somebody that you didn't even realize was the case.
That's a really good point. So one of the exercises that we do with the student athletes is a really simple one, but I think it's a really productive one. And that is we ask them to go out to 15 or 20 people and just say, hey, unvarnished, give me the 3 words that come to mind when you think about me.
Ooh.
We have them list them in an Excel, and then we have them cluster them. And then we have them come back and we ask questions about them. Okay, what'd you take? How was that as an exercise for you? But what are those clusters? Oh, well, I had a bunch of words that were around being very kind or very intelligent or intimidating or aggressive or quiet. That sort of 360, that sort of mirror is an incredible exercise. And it's also very validating. We've had a lot of athletes that have gone through that, and others for that matter, that said, I didn't know I was perceived as kind. I didn't know I was perceived as a leader. I didn't know I was perceived as giving. So I love this idea of just 3 words, unvarnished, from people you trust, that will give it to you straight. And then, as the list and as these clusters or these themes arise, what does that tell you? What's your potential? What's really good? And what's an area of opportunity? What's a detractor that you may have learned along the way that you can work on?
That's a really good activity, a very simple and achievable activity, too, that applies to all sorts of folks. So thanks for sharing that. I hope that people will start to put that into practice and try it out for themselves. I'm curious to try it myself, actually. Yeah.
It's an incredible exercise.
Yeah. Have you done it yours?
Yes. It was a mentor that introduced it to me, and then I stole it and did it with our athletes. And I as much as they became, they got the understanding of the list. What I loved in the reactions was I didn't know, especially when it was a positive. Very validating. Well, then turn that up, or be conscious about that. Manage that moving forward. Be aware of that. Be confident that you're perceived as something really positive. Your friends, your mentors, your professors, whomever it is, see you this way. Don't forget them.
Yeah, that's good. That's powerful stuff. A lot of my audience is passionate about leadership, and as am I. And so I'm curious your take on how storytelling plays a role in building trust to those that you're leading and rallying people around like a shared mission or vision. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think most of the text would speak exactly to that. I'll go back 20 years with Kouzes and Posner, the leadership challenge, right?
Yes.
This idea of inspiring a shared vision, right? This idea that it takes 5% to create a movement and 20% of folks to create an unstoppable force. Well, a big piece of that inspiring a shared vision is not necessarily just the tell. It's not the facts. You can't just get me here. You got to get me here. You got to motivate me to say that where we're going is going to be worth it. And it may be hard. It may be taxing. It may be different. It may be challenging. It may be scary. But it's those stories of where we are, where we're headed, the proxies that we can benchmark. What's going to inspire me to get behind you? It's the story and the storyteller, I think, that does that the best. And you see that across the works. And it doesn't mean, you got Jim Collins in the level 5 leader, right? It doesn't mean you have to be the most aggressive, the most polished, the type A. It's saying, can I communicate to you something really meaningful of where we're headed, and do you want to follow? And what role can you play in the process? And do I believe you? Do I trust you? Do I respect you? Are you being vulnerable with me? So I think the storytelling aspect of that is giant because, again, it gets human and it gets emotional.
I agree. I kind of nerded out when you referenced that book because I am a facilitator for Alpha Gam's Empower program, which is a leadership program. We've been doing it for 3 years now, and we use that text and we go through all of those leadership practices and talk about it. And so I always love when I hear about it in the wild and we get to talk a little bit more about the application of that.
Yeah, there's another great one that I think might be germane to this audience, and that is, 20 years ago, everyone was talking Jim Collins. They were talking Good to Great. I feel like for a period of time, it became trite. It's like, oh, Jim Collins, a leader in Good to Great, et cetera. But his monograph on Good to Great in the social sectors is amazing. 40 pages, and it really brings this idea of purpose versus profit to place. Whether it's the elementary school, whether it's the nonprofit organization, that in 40 pages has taught me about as much as anything about leadership in the days, especially in the work that I've done in higher ed. So I highly recommend it for folks, and it's a quick read or a quick listen. But boy, you get just those 40 pages or even his little summary at the end. It really encompasses his work, and it motivates me as to the leader I want to be, the leaders I want to follow, and maybe the leaders I want to avoid.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Thanks for that tip and recommendation. I want to go back and talk a little bit more in depth about social media. You kind of hit it high level earlier in the conversation and talking about ways that you could, tell your story through that, or the way that it could eventually translate. But I'm just curious, any sort of tangible advice that you have for sorority women, college students, on how they can tell their stories in a meaningful way and not just make their accounts a highlight reel?
Yeah. Again, I think it starts with audiences. And so, the difference between my approach to LinkedIn versus my approach to Instagram, for instance, is going to be different.
Oh, very true.
So I think, first of all, saying, where are the people I want to influence? Where are the eyeballs, so to speak? Understanding the platform and the best practices of that platform, I think, are important, whether it's vertical, horizontal aspects, et cetera. What works in this space, and one in static as well as in the storytelling aspects of reels or stories, et cetera. And then I'd bet on the long game, to be honest. I think of this idea a lot of compound interest. And does my continued commitment to the platform with consistent, excellent, preferably emotive, real, authentic, strategic content ultimately drive those perceptions, those attitudes, beliefs, behaviors that I want about the place? It's not one and done. It's not once a week, right? It's, will you engage with me over time? And over time, do you see an experience, a culture, a fit, a brand, a human? And so I think part of it is being really strategic about your content. Do you have a content calendar? What is the objective? What are you trying to do with this channel? What are the couple of attributes or values or characteristics that you want the watcher, the viewer, the follower to take away? And then asking yourself, what's the personality of what we put forward, right? Are we at home to places? Are we confident? Are we arrogant? Are we spirited? Are we optimistic? Are we strategic? Are we significant? What do we want the personality? How do we want people to feel and think about us when they see our content? And then drive consistent content, authentic content against that over time. There's no shortcut in that regard to me. And so I think that content over time is what creates the compound interest that gets to the perceptions we want to be seen as for anybody in that regard, but especially in this way.
No, you're right. It's definitely a long game. You talked about content calendar. Do you find that many students that you're working with have a strategic plan on their personal social media, or is it just kind of whatever, willy-nilly?
The best do.
Yeah.
And I think more and more the best do, whether we're thinking about our NIL athletes or those that have just learned this idea that content is not just, nilly-willy or just, throw whatever against the wall and it sticks. It's actually asking myself, how do I want to be perceived?
Yeah.
And what are the stories? What are the experiences I want to share? Again, I'm not looking for manufactured. I'm not looking for Hollywood. I'm looking for authentic.
Yep.
But when I put this out, as I think about my own LinkedIn channel, if I put this out, what's the story I'm telling? What's the message I'm sending? And over time, does someone say, I want to engage with your LinkedIn content because you add value. You show me the things to read or to listen to. You introduce interesting people. You talk about vulnerabilities, whatever it may be. Are you strategic about what you're putting out there, or are you just scattershot? I think the best do, and more are these days.
Yeah, that's good to know. I think that's encouraging too, because I feel like social media gets a pretty bad rap, and some of it's, warranted. But I think to have that positive approach to your methods on social media is really beneficial, and it kind of paints it in a new light.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of talk around just having one word, right? What's your one big idea, whether it's Brene Brown and vulnerability, or if it's Dave Ramsey and trust and debt, or whatever it may be. What's your word, right? And does my content over time convey that? You don't have to overthink it, but I do think there's something to be gained in the strategy and the thinking about what I want to put out if we're being this intentional, right? If you just use it for your friends, et cetera, I get it. But if you're trying to cast a perception, a brand, then being strategic about what I'm putting out is, it's like walking into the gym and just saying, I'm going to work out today and having no idea. Most people don't, right? They should go in there with a workout plan. They've got an idea of what I'm trying to achieve. And over weeks and months, what's the objective I'm looking for? Well, it's the same thing with our content. What are those big beliefs or perceptions I want to create? And how do I contribute to that over time?
Yeah, that's very good advice. Okay, final question for you. If a sorority wants to rebrand or better tell its stories to P&Ms, especially as we're coming into recruitment season, what is your number one piece of advice for them about where they should begin and how they should do this?
I don't mean to be redundant. I'm doing this with a group right now.
You're driving the point home. It's okay.
I know repetition matters, especially for the most important things, but
hopefully they're getting it by the end of this conversation.
I think, again, we can talk about the marketing mumbo jumbo of it, but this idea of having an insight, of having an essence or a value proposition, just again, knowing who are we?
Yeah.
What do we stand for, right? What difference do we make in the world, or the change that we're trying to create in the world together? And does that jive? Is it relevant? Is it believable? And should people care? I want to know that. And if you don't, you're probably lost at sea. And so we're working with a group right now to say, what is your value proposition? And I know you knew it 25 years ago. What is it today?
Yeah.
Is it relevant? Is it still you? Is it differentiating? Is it distinct? Is it livable? Does it matter, right? Once I understand that, it can drive a lot of what we go do from then on. But I think you got to get to that deep understanding from the beginning of our positioning, right? Why do we exist? What is our essence? What is our personality? And then we can go kind of higher, I suppose, in the marketing chain here of our tactics, our strategies, the fun stuff. Ask the hard questions, the introspective questions about who we are, what do we stand for, what change we're trying to make in the world, and is it believable? Does the world want it? Does the world desire and demand it? And if they do, then give it to them in spades and turn up the emotion.
All right, there you go, folks. Do the hard work, and then everything else follows, right?
I think that's life.
Ethan, thanks for making time to come on and share all of these great insights with us. If somebody would like to connect with you further, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can find me easily on LinkedIn. The older I get, the less social I use. So I'm not many other places meaningfully. Or you can find me at Texas A&M. I'm on our website, but I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, and welcome any opportunity to help or connect or talk or commiserate. So whatever it may be, I'm pretty easy to find.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome to Liz's House Hot Takes. This is where I take the lessons I've learned over the last 16 years of designing Greek houses and offer you my pro tip. Here's today's house hot take. Layered textures are greater than loud colors. If you want your space to feel elevated and cozy and not chaotic, try layering textures instead of just throwing color everywhere. Think boucle pillows, velvet ottomans, nubby rugs, warmth without the visual overload of color. Thanks for listening to another House Hot Take. For more inspiration, check out the PDR Interiors Instagram or TikTok. I'm Liz Toombs, and this is the Sorority Chat podcast. Catch you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're listening on a podcast platform, make sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. And if you got something out of today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review. It helps us reach more listeners just like you. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to check out this video right here or this one over here. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. On that note, I'm Liz Toombs with Sorority Chat, and I'll see you on the next one. This podcast is produced by Collier Landry for Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Liz Toombs.